Good morning, everyone, and good evening for guests who are joining us from the United States. My name is Gilbert Tam, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at Alliance Advisors. Welcome to our Meet the Experts webinar. Today's topic is Navigating the SPAC listing in Hong Kong, and the discussion will focus on the following areas: an overview of the Hong Kong SPAC regime, the sponsor promoter perspective of launching a SPAC IPO in Hong Kong, these SPAC transactions in the United States, and the SPAC workflow with the financial printer. Our presentation will last for about 75 minutes, followed by a 50-minute Q&A session. Joining us today are 5 experts in the space. Catherin Wong is the Managing Director of Trico Group and Head of Share Registry and Issuer Services. She's our moderator, and we thank her once again for taking up such an important role today. Our panelists are Rodney Teoh, owner-partner of Stevenson Wong & Co. Victor Pang, Managing Director of CMBI, and also well known for being the first promoter to back the Hong Kong first SPAC IPO, Aquila Acquisition Corporation. And Benjamin Lee, Director of Sales and Marketing APAC at Topamero, who has loads of SPAC experience in both Hong Kong and the United States. We are also very pleased to have our US colleague Tom Ball joining us with video. Tom is the Senior Vice President for Proxy and M&A at Alliance Advisors. He will be sharing his review of the US SPAC for the year 2021 and the SPAC outlook for the year 2022. As always, we'd like to hear your feedback and questions. So please send us your questions via the chat box, and we will consolidate those questions and relate them to our speakers during the Q&A session. We'll try to get to all the questions, but if we do not answer yours, we'll get back to you after the webinar. Finally, I would like to remind you that the replay of this webinar will be available on our website, www.allianceadvisors.com. And now, I turn over the microphone over to our moderator, Catherin. Catherin.
Hi, thank you, Gilbert. I'm Catherin Wong, the Head of Share Registry and Issuer Services in Hong Kong, Trico Hong Kong. I'm super excited to join this section as the moderator. As we know, SPAC has been the hottest worldwide fundraising trend for startups, particularly in US. And this year, Hong Kong Stock Exchange has introduced the listing regime for SPAC. Now, starting from January, since then, we have 1 SPAC already listed and 10 more in the pipeline. There are a lot of interest in town indeed. And today, we would like to start off our sections by having Rodney Teoh, the owner-partner of Stevenson Wong & Company, to give us an overview of the Hong Kong SPAC regime. So over to you, Rodney.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you very much, Catherin, for the introduction. Yes, once again, thank you very much to our host, Alliance Advisors Advisory, who invited me to be one of the speakers today. And then thank you for the panelists I'm sure we'll have a fantastic discussion on SPACs. And then, of course, last but not least, thank you very much for our audience. We got a great turnout. So, yeah, it will be a great discussion today. So a bit of self-promotion. I'm Rodney Teoh. I'm an equity partner at Stevenson Wong & Co. I have more than 15 years of experience doing corporate finance. That is IPOs, M&As, listing, fundraising. I do M&A as well and debt capital markets, and also post-listing compliance. I do fintech and blockchain advisory as well lately. So if you have a need, we can always chat. And I'm triple qualified in Hong Kong, Australia, and in the UK. And then I've passed the EVee legal examination last year, so I'm going to get qualified in the PRC this year as well. So a bit of our firm. Stevenson Wong & Co. is a great firm. It's a full-service law firm of more than 40 years. We do cover finance, obviously, litigation, matrimonial, conveyancing, regulatory trusts, wealth management, you name it. So we are quite a bit of a one-stop law firm. And we are also in association with Albright Law Offices, 景天成律师事务所. I'm sure some of the audience is my counterparts in 景天成. So they have grown enormously. They have now got a 24 branch office in the PRC. And we are also a member firm of the law a legal alliance called Into Law. So we are well covered globally as well. So you can see our awards here in the slides. So I'm going to start off with the background of Hong Kong's SPAC regime, how it got incepted, and then we focus on the Hong Kong SPAC listing requirements. And there's some case study that I prepared, but let's see if the time permits me to go over the slides. So as a background, I mean, in the US, SPAC has been around for a long time. In Hong Kong, we looked into the SPAC, US SPACs in formulating our own. So in last March, HKEX and FSC were asked to consider a SPAC regime. And then we, after a few months of preparation and discussion with stakeholders, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has published their consultation. And I'm one of the firms that have submitted a feedback as well. And then the consultation lasts for 45 days and it ends at the end of October. And then the consultation conclusion was published in mid-December last year. So right now it's becoming effective in the 1st of January. And very shortly, we witnessed the first application, which is filed by Aquila. So this is sponsored, this is backed by China's Merchant Bank. So Victor can talk more about that. So at the moment, we have 12 listing applications in Hong Kong in relation to SPACs, with Aquila being listed in mid last month. So there are some data in the slides which you can look into. So pros and cons about a SPAC when compared to traditional IPOs. So yeah, you definitely can save some time because firstly, generally speaking, the SPAC transaction would take a short time frame. A lot of it is because we got a very stringent time frame to meet. Also, SPAC has to the SPAC target can pursue a dual track approach. Thereby, they can seek a traditional IPO. At the same time, they can talk to promoters in relation to getting listed through a SPAC. So that the overlapping of time frames allowed them to achieve a shorter time to get listed. Valuation certainty in terms of the business valuation would be largely determined among the promoters, the target shareholders, and the PIPE investors. So that allows you to arrive consensus easier. So yeah, so it's a good thing in terms of business valuation. We also got some flexibility to tailor bespoke terms for the target because it's in the rules. It allows us to have more room in terms of formulating the compensation, dilution, and then management incentives. So that's a plus. Uncertainty, because for SPACs, we have to provide a right to redemption to SPAC shareholders. So that it creates some uncertainty if we don't get the shareholders' approval that we need, or we got a lapse of time frame. We couldn't find a target before the deadline. That would create uncertainty. In Hong Kong, SPACs is professional investor only. So it's quite different from the US, which we do allow public to participate in SPAC. So that's a double-edged sword in the sense that we do, lock out the retail investor at least at the SPAC stages. So that could minimize the market volatility that it brings. But at the same time, we have to find a professional investor to become our investor of the SPAC at the first phase. So that's not too easy because we do have a stringent requirement as to what qualifies as a PI. And also, SPAC's promoter requirement is quite high because we in Hong Kong it's a bit different from in the US. We adopt a prescriptive approach. We got guidance letters which really prescribe the various indicators as to what constitute a good promoter. We look into not only in their license qualifications, we also look into the character, experience, and integrity. So that's we do have to do a lot of due diligence and also pleading our case to the regulator to show that our promoters have the requisite experience to do the SPAC. So laws and regulation, definitely have to look at Chapter 18B of the listing rules because it provides a general regulatory framework for SPACs and successor companies. And then the guidance letter 113-22 and 114-22 is definitely something that you have to look at because it really gives you a detailed guidelines as to the suitability of SPACs promoters, what are the pipe investment requirements, what the definition of sophisticated investors, how do we assess the fair value market of the SPAC targets, and also the qualification of the trustee, and also something in relation to the operation of the trustee escrow account. We do have a FAQ on SPACs as well, which we can look into. And then SFO, the security of future audience, is important because it contains the definition of the professional investors, and also it provides provision in relation to the disclosure of inside information as well. And in Hong Kong, if there is a change of listed company in Hong Kong, that would trigger a mandatory general offer obligation for the offerer. But in certain circumstances, we can get a waiver from the FSC to waive the mandatory general offer obligation. So we have to look into the PM 23, and also company ordinance, because we do have safe harbors as to we can definitely get an exemption to register the offering sector at the SPAC stages. But in terms of the SPAC transaction, we definitely treat the offering circular as a prospectus as well. So we have to fulfill the CO requirements as well on that stage. Okay, some key definition in relation to Hong Kong SPACs, because I think it's useful to make sure that the audience and our panelists will have a common understanding as to the key terminologies. So SPACs is a blank check company. So essentially, it's a shell company which raises the fund through an IPO and then do a business combination with an existing operating company within a defined time frame. Hold on, I got some technicality. How do I go back? Sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. And then in Hong Kong, again, it's a PI only, so we only get allowed to have a professional investor be our investor of the SPAC stages. So in terms of definition, we have two kinds of professional investors. Firstly, the institutional investors. We are talking about a licensed corporation, essentially. So we are talking about FSC licensed corporation or registered institutions, licensed registered with the FSC, and then we got financial institutions with essentially banks. We talk about the three-tier bank system in Hong Kong. So that's that. And then insurance companies and authorized CIS, which stands for Collective Investment Scheme. And then we also have a non-institutional investors. We're talking about high net worth individuals and corporations. So you can see that for individual, we're talking about an individual having a portfolio of no less than 8 million Hong Kong dollars. And then for corporation trusts and partnerships, we're talking about like 8 million portfolio or total assets of 40 million Hong Kong dollars. And portfolio, we are talking about securities, CDs, and money. So yeah, money and shares and debentures. So it's not easy to have a portfolio of at least $8 million. So it's not easy to fulfill. So SPAC promoters, we're talking about professional managers of with private equity, corporate finance, or related industry experience. In Hong Kong, we need at least one SPAC promoter being a firm which holds a FSC license. We're talking about a Type 6 advising on corporate finance and or a Type 9 asset management license issued by the FSC. This SPAC promoter has to hold at least 10% of the promoter shares as well, so that they have the incentive, and also it ties into the role of being the one who identify the suitable SPAC targets and negotiate the terms thereof. And then SPAC directors, we need at least 2 licensed individuals licensed by the FSC, including one representing the licensed SPAC promoter. So some key listing requirements, definitely just a summary. So you have to look into Chapter 18B for the details, guidance letter for the details. Suffice to say, again, it's PI only. We have to at least have 75 professional investors, of whom at least 20 of them has to be institutional investors. And then such institutional investor must hold at least 75% of the IPO shares. And then we do have a fundraising size of at least 1 billion, and then issue price has to be at least $10 per share. A minimum lot size of in relation to SPAC shares of at least 1 million. There's no prescribed lot size for the listed warrants. And then SPAC promoters, they not only they have to fulfill the licensing requirement, and also they have to fulfill the character, experience, and integrity requirements as well. Again, we have to look into their, how many SPACs they have done, and then what are the background experience on SPACs and other areas, asset management, corporate finance. So it's something that we'll have to focus on. And then SPAC director is explained in the last slide, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. And then escrow account. So 100%, not 90% or 80%, the whole of the SPAC proceeds have to be held in the escrow account to meet redemptions and for the purpose of returning of funds if the SPAC fails. And then warrants, the exercise price has to be at least a 15% premium to the IPO price. And then we do have a prescribed exercise period which commences after the SPAC completion. Okay, the SPAC transaction stage, we treat the target as the new listing. So they have to meet all the necessary new listing requirements. That include the financial eligibility test. In Hong Kong, we have 3 kinds of financial tests which we can choose to fulfill. The most popular one would be the profit requirement. Thereby, we have to fulfill the 3 years, 18 million Hong Kong profit requirement. And then we have to do due diligence. We have to fulfill the management and management and the ownership continuities. We have to make sure that the target is suitable for listing. And that's is something that is subject to scrutiny of the regulators. So it's quite a bit there. And then for the target fair market value, it has to be at least 80% of the funds raised by the SPAC. We do prescribe mandatory PIPE investment requirement. So depending on the negotiated the SPAC value, if the PIPE investment has to constitute 7.5 to 25% of the issued shares. And then the dilution cap, the promoters must not hold more than 20% of the issued share cap at the listing stage. 30% if the authority approves the additional earnouts. And also the warrants, when it issue, it cannot be more than the 50% of shares at the time is issued. But the SPAC transaction has to be approved by the shareholders, which is similar to US. And the SPAC promoters is constituted as a connected person under the rules. So they, the promoters and their respective close associates must abstain from voting during for the SPAC transaction. Redemption rights: the shareholders may elect to redeem all part of the holdings at the IPO price, and then at the SPAC stage, we have to have at least 100 professional investors. And we do prescribe a lockup period of 12 months from these SPACs for our promoters. So in terms of deadline for the SPAC transaction, we talk about 24 months from SPAC listing, which we have to announce the SPAC transaction, and then another year to close the SPAC transaction. If we fail to SPAC, then suspension of the trading of shares, and then shortly after, about a month, we have to return the funds raised during the SPAC listing, and then we have to proceed to delisting and liquidation. Okay, a comparison table of Hong Kong SPAC with the rest of the world. So Hong Kong has the most stringent requirements in relation to SPAC, not for the bad reason. It's actually a good thing in a sense. The first one, investor eligibility, pure PI SPAC stage SPAC listing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing because we kind of limit the risk involved in relation to locking out the retail investor. Again, we got the highest fundraising size requirement, but it's not we're talking about 1 billion. It's actually not higher by much when we compare to the US counterparts. We do focus quite a bit on the profiles of the SPAC promoters and directors. We look into their experience, which I've talked about, and also they have to be licensed. And the PIPE investment, again, is compulsory, so it's something that is different from our counterparts. A lockup period, the promoter certainly is subject to a lockup of 12 months. In terms of the controlling shareholders, they are also subject to a lockup of a 6+6 lockup period as well. It essentially means that for the first 6 months, they can't sell a share, but then after the first 6 months, they can sell some shares in the second 6 months, but they can't lose their controlling shareholder status from those disposals. So dilution cap, again, the promoter shares cannot be more than 20%, but you can negotiate if the stock exchange approves such earnout provisions. So this is the flow chart of the typical process of a Hong Kong SPAC listing. Generally speaking, there are 3 stages. Firstly, we have to formulate our SPAC. It certainly involves like talking with the clients, talking with the promoters and director, asking about the aims of doing the SPACs, and definitely ironing out of relation to the terms and conditions of the SPAC. And then when things are ready, we will proceed to kick off the SPAC listing project. Thereby, we are going to appoint professional investors to really go in deep to doing the due diligence of the SPAC, especially the promoters and directors, the financial, internal control, etc. At the same time, we'll go on and drafting the offering circular, as well as preparing the listing application documents. When everything is said, everyone sign off the document, we proceed to A1 submit, do the A1 submission. A1 is really the main board listing application form that we have in Hong Kong. So when you talk about A1 submission, we talk about main board listing application. So after we submit it, we would wait for the regulators to vet our applications. In Hong Kong, we have two main regulators. One is Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The other one is FFC, Security Future Commission. So normally they have at least two batch of queries from each of the regulators. So we have to prepare quite swiftly and to reply their comments. And so if things are well, then the listing department will invite us to have a hearing with the listing committee. If things go well, we will get AIP, which stands for approval in principle. And then, yeah, so once we got the approval in principle, then we would proceed to do our underwriting and offer the best shares and warrants. And when the offer becomes unconditional, then we will proceed to get listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So the whole thing, the submission stage would take around 2 to 3 months, and the vetting stage another 2 to 3 months. So it can happen quite quickly if things are quite well. And yes, that's that. Okay, some case study. We prepare the 12 listing application we have so far in the Hong Kong SPAC ecosystem. Aquila is definitely something that we have to look at because it's the first SPAC listing that we witnessed, and it also got listed in March 18, that's not last month. And also you can see the threads of the sponsor and the promoters involved. You can see a lot of US investment funds who are the sponsors. Also, at the same time, we got quite a bit of China sponsors with China background as well. In terms of promoters, we got a different you got some variety of the promoters involved with definitely some Chinese background and something that we can explore in the next slide as well. So interesting profiles of our promoters and directors. Firstly, we got Dr. Norman Chan. So he is the ex-CE of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, who lead the launch of the Tracker Fund of Hong Kong back in 1999. And then we got Jason Wong, who is dubbed as the godfather of Asia SPACs. So he's involved in quite a bit of US SPACs. And then we got a high-profile businessman. We got Mr. Wei, who is the ex-CEO of Alibaba, and then leading, which doesn't need an introduction, his famous Genesis, who found a sporting brand with his own name. So slides in relation to first SPAC listing, Aquila Acquisition Corporation, which is backed by China Merchants Bank. Again, I would leave it to Victor to talk more about this. And then ACE 8 Acquisition Corporation, This is the one relating to James Wong, and then his nephew Eugene Wong is the eevee. So the CMCC is the sponsor, and BDO is the auditor. Okay, Hong Kong Acquisition Corporation, the one that relates to Norman Chan. So yeah, so these are the profiles of that deal as well, which I'm not going to because I'm running out of time. So yes, that kind of concludes my presentation. That's you can see my QR codes in the left bottom corner. So feel free to scan and have a chat with me on the SPAC or corporate finance in general. So thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you, Rodney, for giving us such a comprehensive, active, and very useful overview of the SPAC listing regime in Hong Kong. Now we would like to switch a lens a bit and try to actually look from the sponsor and promoter perspective in launching a SPAC IPO in Hong Kong. We're happy to have Victor Pan, the Manager Director of CMBI, who is the first promoter of the SPAC listed in Hong Kong. So Victor, over to you. I'll give the time to you. Victor, you have to unmute the mic.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So you can hear me now, right? Okay. So yeah, thank you very much for Alliance Advisors in organizing this event, and also Rodney had also just have a very clear introduction on the ground rules, I would say, for on SPAC, Hong Kong SPAC. So well, yes, I'm Victor Pang from China Merchants Bank, CMBI. So yeah, as already mentioned by Rodney, we actually we were involved in the Aquila Acquisition Corporation SPAC IPO in Hong Kong. Okay, let me jump to my slide. Okay, this is as you can see. Okay, these are the details of such SPAC, and CMBI. We act as not only the sponsor but also the promoter of this SPAC. And just a very quick maybe introduction of CMBI if you are not familiar with us actually. Well, we are also one of the very large state-owned banks. Okay, so we are not the big four, but outside the big four, we are quite sizable, I would say. And then we have a very good presence in the Hong Kong market as a financial institution. Okay, not only I myself am from the corporate finance side, and if you listen to what Rodney has just said, okay, he also mentioned that this Type 6 and Type 9, okay, so-called Type 6 and Type 9 regulatory regulated activities in Hong Kong. What does that stands for is actually, okay, Type 6 is corporate finance and Type 9 is asset management. Okay, which are actually two very important qualifications of being involved in as a SPAC promoter in Hong Kong. Well, basically what that means is, okay, being as a promoter or also being qualified as a director of the SPAC. Okay, you have got to have the experience in and also be being a license for either Type 6 corporate finance or Type 9 asset management activities, which licenses are granted by the Hong Kong SFC, okay, the Securities Futures Commission in Hong Kong. So I hold the Type 6 corporate finance activities license and I'm experienced in this acting as sponsor, okay, sponsor for IPO activities in Hong Kong. So I've been involved in a lot of traditional IPOs for companies, and also certainly, I mean, I'm also involved in this SPAC, okay, IPO in Hong Kong, okay, and CMBI at the same time, certainly, I mean, for this case, for this Aquila case, I also work with my colleagues who are on the asset management side. Okay, so they hold the Type 9 license, being the promoter, and also so my involvement is being the as a sponsor, mainly responsible for helping them to put forward to prepare and to also to put forward the application to the Hong Kong regulators, okay, including the Hong Kong SFC and also the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, okay, basically, okay, helping them to complete the vetting process and also get to obtain the approval for listing for this SPAC, okay. So just like so, basically CMBI wearing two hats, okay. We are also the promoter, we are also the sponsor. And you can see, as you can see from the details here, okay, so the deal size is 1 billion Hong Kong. I would say that it is not a very, very, okay, say sizable deal in terms of fundraising, but well, it actually fits the requirement, which is, as Rodney mentioned, okay, which is 1 billion Hong Kong fundraising is the minimum size for a SPAC in Hong Kong. And then, okay, we very typically, and also along the what the requirement says, we issue the shares at $10 per share. Okay, so we got our these shares and also the warrants listed, okay, in mid-March. Overall, it is I would say quite an efficient exercise. Well, just basically, okay, you know, what is the rules, okay, the policy actually came out back in mid-December last year, okay, and then just basically a month later, our case Aquila, we put forward our application in mid-January, okay, and then it took just only 2 months from putting forward the application to getting this company, this SPAC listed, okay, which listed in mid-March, okay. So, okay, I would say, well, the policy came out in December. We took a month for us to prepare for the application, and then it took 2 months to listing. So I would say, well, it is a quite efficient process. We basically how we did it is we work hand in hand with the regulators. Okay, it is a new process to us, certainly, and also it is quite a new process to them. I think this is the first, I would say, the demonstration of just like how the process works and so on. Actually, it is really a development process. Okay, I mean, certainly, okay, they issue the policy in December. However, there are actually rooms for clarification, I would say. And that also explains why, okay, after they issued the policy in December, and then and also, okay, even during the vetting process of our case Aquila, the stock exchange also follow up with issuing 2 guidance letters, okay, guidance letters on this topic. Basically, okay, I think they also feel that there are certain areas that they need to clarify more to the market, and so, well, yeah, so that's it. Let me okay, so, well, for many of these, the details of the Aquila case, this you will have access to that in the public. But okay, as you can see, right? Okay, okay, for the promoter, okay, for the promoter, as I mentioned, it is CMB, but also you can see, okay, it is CMB with 4 individuals. Okay, basically all these individuals are the directors of this SPAC. Okay, they held a bit of shares of promoter shares by each of them. I would say as a for the incentive purpose, basically. But okay, under the Hong Kong rules, okay, acting as a SPAC, the directors of SPAC, and also you are holding the shares, you will also be part of the promoters. So that's why, okay, if you look at the promoter structure, this SPAC is basically, okay, being led by CMB Asset Management and also 4 individuals, basically. And well, there is a target focus on the SPAC target, okay. Well, it's also new economy sectors, which is seems to be quite usual to many of the SPAC applicants. Right. Okay. So as you can also see, the timeline is okay. We are required to announce the SPAC target within 24 months of listing and completing the deal within 36 months, which is also actually aligned with the rules requirements, right? And well, and the many other details are actually okay along the lines of the requirements, the policy, yeah. And let's see, okay. So as you can see, okay, we apart from the promoters' shares on also the warrants, which the promoters injected funds into the SPAC. So also that is a promoter loan, okay, which the promoter has also offered a loan to the SPAC company. Actually, okay, the funding from the subscription of the promoter shares, promoter warrants, and also the promoter loans are basically to support the running of the SPAC, okay, for the future years, okay, basically the future 36 months till the completion of the SPAC process. And that's the requirement. And also, okay, comparing to the traditional IPOs, okay, in Hong Kong, when we do the traditional IPOs for okay, for normal cases, with business in substance, I say, yeah, okay, we need to prove that, okay, that is sufficient cash flow of listing applicants for at least the 12 months after listing. But for SPAC companies, okay, they don't have real businesses, but okay, we have to prove to the regulators that there is sufficient fund for the next 36 months, okay, 36 months, which is till the completion of the SPAC, okay. But it should be fine. I would say it should be fine. A very quick ballpark figure to for as an idea is okay. The injection and also the loan would, okay, say around 50 million Hong Kong dollars, okay, by the promoters, and then that should be sufficient for, to be honest, that should be sufficient for the listing of the SPAC, okay, which, okay, for the, say, for example, the professional parties fees for getting the SPAC vehicle listed, and also say the commission for the underwriting commission for the fundraise for this SPAC vehicle, and also the, I would say, rather minimal, okay, expenses for the SPAC vehicle, okay, running, okay, in search of the SPAC targets. Because, you know, just like Aquila, okay, it is very much supported by the promoters. Okay, even for these directors, senior management of the SPAC vehicle, they are also working for the promoter, okay, for CMBI Asset Management. So actually, they are receiving quite minimal directors' fees or salary from the SPAC vehicle going forward. Okay, and they are the SPAC vehicle is receiving full support from the promoter company. So so that's why, I mean, actually the expenses going forward, okay, during the search of these SPAC targets is rather, I would say, controllable. And so this seed money, I would say, seed investment from the promoter should be sufficient for the next 36 months. All right, so Yeah, so certainly, okay. I think I won't repeat the ground rules that Rodney has already mentioned. You know that there's a redemption mechanism. Certainly, I mean, well, if the SPAC just say did not happen, so I mean that is a redemption of shares, okay, mechanism in place, okay, and certainly, I mean, which I think, I mean, you can call it stringent, but in Hong Kong, right, I would say the regulators have put in place, okay, a mechanism which is which has got full protection to the investors in SPAC. Just like the money raised are in place in the escrow account, okay, all along. So, well, they are quite safe there. And then just in case, I mean, the SPAC just don't happen. I mean, the money are there, the money are in place for redemption. Okay, so right. Okay, so well, as you can see, this is say, okay, a brief introduction also on the Hong Kong exchange, Hong Kong market as being suitable for listing for new economy companies. I know. I mean, why I'm saying I'm also including these contents here is because, right, at the end of the day, okay, why Hong Kong, right? I mean, okay, so SPAC is not a very it's not a new idea in the US or many other markets, but so why setting up? Why choosing to set up a SPAC and get it listed in Hong Kong? I mean, is there a niche or any edge? I mean, comparing to the other markets? Okay, I mean, one of those. Okay, first of all, I mean, SPAC basically it provides, I would say, another channel for the listing of companies in Hong Kong, right? At the end of the day, okay, this is only the first step. You get it. You have this SPAC company listed. Okay, certainly the next step would be say de-SPAC. Okay, but de-SPAC, okay, we know that it stands for, okay, basically, okay, maybe, okay, through a share swap, okay, a potential de-SPAC target would be injected into the shell, and then have it itself being listed in Hong Kong, in the Hong Kong market, right? So, okay, why? Okay, this makes sense, right? Because first of all, okay, and you can see a lot of these SPAC vehicles, even they are now still going through the vetting process. I mean, in the prospectus, they have already mentioned that they are targeting this new economy or biotech companies, and in China, or maybe also in the Asia region. Okay, so I think well, it's because, okay, it does provide a lot of opportunities. Okay, you as a promoter, when you decide to launch a SPAC in the Hong Kong market, you would think, okay, whether there are suitable de-SPAC targets, or whether there are plenty of de-SPAC targets. And also, this is why, okay, when we say that, okay, the Hong Kong market, okay, seems that, okay, it does suit, okay, the listing of new economy companies and biotech companies. And then, okay, at the end of the day, okay, those de-SPAC target would feel it being attracted to list in the Hong Kong market, and also at the same time, it would give plenty of opportunities for the promoters to pick suitable targets. Okay, so I think this fits the bill. Okay, so that's why, okay, it explains why, I mean, there are market opportunities here. And okay. Now, okay, maybe one point I also wish to share is, okay, well, some people may ask, okay, so Victor, okay, yeah, we know that Hong Kong is suitable for listing for new economy sector companies, right? Okay, so well, so they would just go to Hong Kong get themselves listed, right? So so why do they need to go through the SPAC channel, right? Okay, I mean, we don't have SPAC before, right? Just like, but Hong Kong market still has got a lot of new economy companies listing, right? Okay, so now today you say you got this SPAC vehicles as an alternative channel. Okay, but why they have to list through a SPAC vehicle rather than getting themselves listed by themselves? I think one point that I wish to share is it is not okay. Just like okay, a quick example, right? For this a new economy listing applicants, right? Yes, certainly it can go through the traditional IPO application process in Hong Kong, but it first of all, it takes time. It takes time, and also it has to go through the vetting process. It have to clear all the queries from the regulators, and also it is quite challenging sometimes under this volatile market condition, because right, okay, it is not only a case of satisfying the regulators on the regulatory side, but also it has to convince the investors, convince the market that for its valuation, for example, right, and which is acceptable to the company on also to satisfy the fundraising, okay, for the fundraising purpose. Okay, so given the regulatory clearing process, and also for this market condition, it is sometimes not actually that straightforward, I would say, or say, okay, if you launch a traditional IPO application in Hong Kong, and then which you are ensured that you can complete the whole process, say within 6 months or even 9 months, okay. And also partly because there is a long queue there. You notice there are a lot of applications pending, okay, in the Hong Kong market. Now, while okay, if you go through a SPAC channel, right? Okay, well, basically it could mean, right? It is just a negotiation between the promoters and your company, and then also with the independent PIPE investors, some this professional or sophisticated investors, okay, so it's among the promoters, some the professional investors and your company that you can formulate a valuation that is agreed. I mean, among these parties, and then if acceptable to all, then you can basically launch this SPAC process, right? Certainly, I mean, it's not only the promoter and also the independent professional investors recognition. It also has to go through this shareholders approval process. But well, it actually, to be honest, it saves quite a lot of time. I mean, because I would say to the regulators, I mean, they would have less concern, I would say, on whether the valuation of this SPAC target is so-called justifiable. Okay, because given that the promoter and also some independent professional investors has already, I would say, given the view on the valuation. Okay, and also because if it has gone through the all these shareholders approval process, basically to the Hong Kong regulator, it means there is already full protection to the investors, to the minority shareholders, right? So they would it is much easier for them to give a green light to the listing of this SPAC target. Yeah. So okay, let me just continue. Okay. So from the promoter side, right? Okay. So also we receive a lot of inquiries on, oh, how come that yeah, okay, 2 months vetting process of your Aquila deal seems really efficient. Okay, and how did you do that? Okay, well, to be honest, there's no magic. There's no magic. It's just I would say, okay, it maybe okay to the Hong Kong regulator, just like a financial institution. Okay, just like CNBI. Okay, with a good track record on this asset management business in Hong Kong, and with good track record of which can demonstrate that in terms of regulatory compliance and also in terms of investment experience, that it has quite a good record in the Hong Kong market. So it is much easier for them to accept, okay, that okay, this promoter is qualified. Okay, certainly, I mean, as also mentioned in Rodney's talk, okay, that you can see that okay, there are others promoters in other cases with some very high-profile individuals and also institutions. Okay, maybe I can't comment too much on okay the qualifications, but I think to the Hong Kong regulator, okay, it is to them. I mean, they would feel to them, okay, one of the very most important assessment of whether a promoter is qualified is still its track record in of the business track record in the Hong Kong market, and then which shows that they have sufficient resources, sufficient experience, and a good regulatory compliance record. I think that is to them, okay, and to a vetting process that is much easier to go through. Okay. Well, let me see. Well, other some execution priorities. I think that is from sponsor perspective. Well, there are a few points, but I just will maybe highlight some of them. It's just okay. First of all, right, for the a sponsor, okay, comparing to traditional IPOs, well, the work, I would say the work done involved is was much less maybe for listing a SPAC vehicle, which obviously because okay, SPAC is still SPAC vehicle is still very much like a shell, okay, and they are comparing to traditional IPOs. Okay, we have to gone through much less, just like due diligence work on businesses or financial side or legal side. But okay, still okay, we have to put a lot of efforts on the due diligence against the promoters, the directors, the management of the SPAC vehicles, and also, for example, some nitty-gritties. I would say, just like the as showing in this slide, the escrow account, I would say the trustee of this company. Okay, well, certainly, I mean, why I wish to highlight this is actually, I mean, from our experience, this is not as I would say easy as we thought. Okay, in looking for a trustee for our SPAC vehicle. Okay, the first of all, okay, the regulator did lay out the policy on saying that okay, for the trustee of SPAC vehicle, they expect them to be comply with this code of unit trust in Hong Kong. Okay, and then okay, we thought that okay, wow, there are a lot of these international and local players, banks, commercial banks, or whatnot, okay, in Hong Kong who are acting as trustee. So shouldn't be a big problem, right? But at the end of the day, okay, it actually proved that okay, even some of the very big international names in the market who are actually acting as trustee of many funds, this seems to be a new idea to them actually, that being a trustee of a SPAC vehicle listed in the Hong Kong market. And then, well, in short, actually, it took some time actually for them, for the internal to confirm that okay, they are actually being capable or to be able to meet the requirements. And at the end, right, it seems that okay, this is not that straightforward. And then at the end, okay, just like for Aquila, at the end we found another Chinese bank, a Chinese bank which is able to take up the trustee role. Okay, so this is just a point that seems that okay, that would actually affect the vetting process. Okay, in terms of timing, this is not something that it cannot be sorted, but in terms of timing, it seems to took us a little bit of surprise, to be honest. But at the end, okay, it just and actually, I mean, the regulator has actually issued a guidance letter on specifically on this topic. Okay, in the end of January. So okay, I think this is pretty well addressed now. Okay, so another point is maybe okay is the connected transactions. Okay, because I mean one of the many questions, common questions that we have been asked is okay, because okay, we talked to a lot of potential promoters, and then the promoters would ask okay. We are interested in launching a SPAC in Hong Kong, and then at the same time we do have a lot of investments in different areas. Okay, but so at the end, okay, we being as a promoter of a SPAC, can we at the end having a SPAC target, which is also one of the investments of the promoters, or I would say okay, maybe which could become a connected transaction by the SPAC on the SPAC. First of all, okay, the rules doesn't say that. Okay, the rules do not say that. Okay, a connected transaction is prohibited, and our view is that okay, it is just it will be acceptable to the exchange. I mean, as long as it work along the lines of just like the connected, how it treats this as a connected transaction in Hong Kong, including, for example, okay, there's a string from voting by the connected parties, and also with the including a view of the independent financial advisor, okay, during the shareholders approval process, then that should be fine. Yeah. Well, okay, I think I would stop here. Okay, I mean, certainly I will welcome questions in the Q&A transaction and Q&A sections, and also here are my contact details. Okay, if anyone would be interested in discussing more on this topic, okay, with me later on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Very interesting details exactly how the SPACs actually were run. And I think that knowing all these changes and trends in Hong Kong, maybe it's a good time that we start to look in how US, the original place of where the SPAC starts, actually works. With much longer history in operation, obviously, the US market will give us a bit more insight on area that we can reference on or watch out for. Now, we have Tom Ball, the Senior VP for Proxy and M&A at Alliance Advisor, to share the review of the SPAC IPOs in US. I think that was a video that we can actually show to the audience, right?
Yeah, that's right. Just bear with us for a second. You know, we will play the video now.
Good day. Good day. This is Tom Ball. I'm a Senior Vice President in the Proxy Solicitation M&A Group at Alliance Advisors. I have been with Alliance for almost 2 years now, having been at Morris Adali previously for over 30 years. On behalf of Alliance and my colleagues, both in the US and in Hong Kong, I'm glad to be here today to talk with you. Today, I want to review SPACs. In particular, let's look back at SPACs in 2021. And then I want to review what we see going forward in 2022. And then we'll talk about SPAC solicitations in the US, what the process is in doing SPAC solicitations in the US. And then I'll finish up with just a post-SPAC services that Alliance can provide. So let's go to slide 1, please. So 2021 was a record year for SPACs, for SPAC IPOs in particular. But it was a real roller coaster, with the beginning being very strong, and then SPACs falling off in the second and third quarter, then picking up again in the fourth. So 2001, again, began very strong with 314 SPAC IPOs in Q1. And that's a huge number of listings. In fact, there were more SPAC IPOs in Q1 2021 than in any prior full year. It's amazing. These listings raised a massive US $100.3 billion. So it was a record first quarter. However, after this strong start, there was a rapid slowdown in the second and third quarters of 2021. This slowdown was due primarily to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, which released a statement on accounting and reporting considerations for warrants issued by SPACs. In particular, this statement questioned the treatment by SPACs of their warrants as equity rather than liabilities. So this SEC release put a real chill on the market. However, in Q4 of 2021, we saw a recovery. In Q4, we saw 163 SPAC IPOs priced, and we saw 61 de-SPAC transactions announced. So it came back towards the end of the year. And in all, in 2021, we saw 679 SPAC job IPOs globally, worth a combined US $172.2 billion. So 2001 was quite a year. One other item that I would note in 2021 is that we saw that redemptions continued to rise throughout the year. According to SPAC Research, SPAC Alpha, from January to July, the average monthly SPAC redemption rate was between 7% and 43%. From July to November, that range increased from 43% to 67%, with the average SPAC seeing approximately a 60% redemption rate during these months. From December and continuing into 2022, we've seen a striking increase in redemptions, with many SPACs seeing redemption rates over 90%. So redemptions continue to rise. If we could go to slide 2, please. So looking ahead to 2022, for 2022, we expect that market and regulatory challenges will continue throughout 2022, especially in light of comments by the SEC commissioner regarding SPACs recently. But we believe the SPAC market remains healthy, and SPACs are likely to continue to be a major asset class going forward. To that end, so far in 2022, we have seen 55 SPAC IPOs. If we could go to slide 3, please. In slide 3, we are going to cover the SPAC solicitation process as we see it here in the US. First, I would note that there are many similarities between proxy solicitations for regular listed companies and SPACs. It's many of the same procedures, the logistics, the players are similar, but there are several notable differences. First, you're almost always dealing with a very compressed time frame. In a normal proxy solicitation, you have 6 to 7 weeks typically from the distribution of the proxy material until the shareholder meeting. In a SPAC, it's much more compressed. You're likely to have a shorter solicitation period of 3 to 4 weeks from distribution to meeting date. So a much more compressed time frame. And the reasons for that are, the sponsors, the target company, and the advisors look to get the SPAC solicitation completed as soon as possible. The main reason is to reduce market risk. The other reason is you're compressed with time because the SPAC will expire at a certain point. So you want to get the SPAC solicitation done as soon as you can, but leave some time at the end in the event you need to adjourn the meeting to do additional solicitation. So again, compressed time frame on a SPAC. Another difference, and I think a notable one, is that our client, which would be the founders and the sponsors of the SPAC, have a vested economic interest in seeing the deal close. They have the money on the line. So you're dealing with people who are very focused on getting the deal done, and it puts increased focus on everybody working on the solicitation. Another notable difference is that SPAC investors are different. You're not dealing with traditional long-only institutions like a Vanguard or a Fidelity. You're dealing typically with smaller institutions, hedge funds, professional investors, a different group of people. Also, the retail component tends to be smaller. In some SPACs, we've seen it grow, but it's not as big as it is at a typical listed company. You're not dealing with a large number of individual shareholders. One of the biggest differences between a SPAC solicitation and a regular solicitation is that you have redemptions in a SPAC. So in addition to monitoring the vote during the solicitation, we also monitor redemptions. As a proxy solicitor, as votes come in during the solicitation, we are identifying shareholders who have voted on a daily basis, identifying the institutions behind the custodial positions, just like we would in a regular solicitation. But in a SPAC, we also monitor the redemptions. So our client knows who is redeemed in the event that they or the bankers want to reach out to that investor to see if they can reverse the redemption. So you're tracking voting and redemptions in a SPAC solicitation. And this involves the process of working very closely with the tabulator, getting hourly or more frequent updates from the tabulator as to which brokers have requested a redemption. And then we cross-reference those brokers, those custodians, with the list of identified institutions where we've identified which custodian they hold through. And I would note that the redemptions tend to be towards the end of the process. It's a real rush at the end of the solicitation. In the closing days of the process, it can be very hectic. So knowing who your shareholders are is critical. Knowing in advance is critical. By doing that, we're able, again, to tell a client who has redeemed so they can reach out to those holders. But again, you need to do the work of identification in advance. And so while I'm on that, I thought I'd just take a moment to talk about the importance of shareholder identification in the SPAC solicitation. I believe that SPAC solicitation, success in the SPAC solicitation is based in a large part on knowing who your shareholders are. This is really key. And to be successful, we always look to start that process as soon as we can, early in the process. Start the ID well in advance of the record date so that you know the shareholders, you know the shareholder base, and you can create a custom solicitation plan based on those institutions and that shareholder profile. Also, doing the ID early allows us to monitor the trading before the record date so we can see shifts in the shareholder profile. Starting the process early, again, is very important. Knowing the right people is important. That's part of our process, is identifying not just the institution, but who the voter is, who the investment manager is at that institution. So we can find out first how they intend to vote. And then as voting occurs, we can help the institutions execute the vote. In many cases, we're dealing with shareholders, whether it's hedge funds or professional investors, who may not be used to the voting process and may not have it set up like traditional institutions do. So part of our job is to help them get their shares voted properly. Talking to their custodian, making sure the instructions go from the institution to the custodian to Broadridge. Very important process. So now let's go to slide 4. Just briefly want to cover post-SPAC. What happens once the company has de-SPACed and is now a newly public company? First of all, shareholder profile analysis is critical. The company will now have a new shareholder base because of the number of redemptions. You will have new shareholders. You're a newly public company. You want to know who your shareholders are. And this is important for investor relations and for officers in the C-suite to know, who are the institutions, who are the contacts for investor relation purposes, who are the contacts for corporate governance purposes. Knowing those contacts is very helpful in the company establishing those relations early on in the process. And as part of our process of doing the identification, we also monitor trading. There's a lot of trading and a lot of turnover early in the process. And so we're constantly updating the shareholder profile so that we have the most current list of shareholders. Finally, I would just note that there are other services that Alliance can provide to the newly public company, from corporate governance consulting to proxy solicitation for the first annual meeting, both retail and institutional. We can also manage the planning and the mechanics for the annual meeting, from print and mail to tabulation to setting up and conducting the virtual shareholder meeting. So there's a lot for the new company to do. They face a lot, and we can be there to help them. And that concludes my remarks today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. That was actually a very interesting sections about how the US actually work, particularly about the corporate communications actually, and also the voting process for the SPAC transaction and life cycle. Now, the last section is actually we would have Benjamin Lee, the Director of Sales and Marketing, APAC at Top Pen Merrill, who actually have loads of SPAC IPO exposure both in Hong Kong and the US to cover the SPAC workflow with the financial printer for us. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Catherine, and quick thanks to Gilbert and his team at Alliance Advisors for hosting this webinar today. And definitely, it was great to hear from Victor and Rodney. I don't think there's enough communications regarding the Hong Kong SPAC regime, given that it's such a hot topic. So thanks a lot for having us to have a quick discussion on this. It's great to see people again. It's been a very strange time. I ran through this presentation to my kids. The 4-year-old lasted about 1 minute, and the 1-year-old 3 or 4 minutes, but it's only because somebody was making milk behind me. So I hope I fare a little bit better with you guys. So like Catherine said, my name is Ben from Top Pen Merrill. Top Pen Merrill is a global company that deals with financial documentation, reporting, compliance, regulations. So, we touch a lot on not just SPACs, but capital markets products, and post-listing, the compliance requirements. And, I want to point out that, a lot of people use financial printer or call us the printers. It's a little bit of a misnomer. I think actual physical printing is, a very small percentage of what we actually do. And that's if you include clients coming in house and printing out the menus for the food that they're going to order. So I think, it's probably more useful for this presentation to let you know the financial printer actually provides a platform for the issuers and the various working parties to collaborate and to work on drafting and curating a document. So in this case, it would be the listing application for the SPACs in Hong Kong. So with that in mind, I'm just going to go over very quickly the different stages that both Rodney and Victor mentioned before, but just highlighting a bit of where we get involved. So you see here as the overview of the listing stages, there are the different sections. During the pre-application time frame, what we do is that we take the draft prospectus from usually the council, and what we do is typeset it to get it ready to be in the proper format. But what's very different with a Hong Kong SPAC versus a US SPAC is the requirement that we need to translate it into Chinese as well. Now, this is definitely something that people who are familiar with US SPACs may find not so familiar, but it is quite a intensive process, to be able to have the English version while the different parties are making their comments and markups and amendments. Real time, we need to make that translation happen for the Chinese document to match up with the English document. Now, while this is going on in the background, what we also do, I guess pre-COVID, Aquila, which we were very proud to have played a part by hosting Aquila in the various professional parties. I think they were the last SPAC that actually came in-house for the drafting session. So by in-house, we provide the conference facilities for the different parties to actually physically be together to work on the document, which, as I understand it, makes the workflow a lot more efficient. Even though since Aquila, we've been hosting a bunch of other Hong Kong SPAC projects, which are hosted via a virtual Zoom session. So that's the pre-application process, and it gets moved on into the actual submission. And Victor touched on this a bit as well. There are two main documents that need to be submitted. One is the prospectus that is in a vetting version, and this is a English-only version for the Hong Kong Exchange, the SFC, to use for the vetting process. But at the same time, where the translation comes into play is for the application proof publication version, in which case these get uploaded to the exchange and is hosted on the website. This is the part where both English and Chinese versions need to be done. And these versions are redacted versions so that any information pertaining to offering details and whatnot are redacted. At this point, we actually do some printing where we print out copies for use by the exchange and the SFC. After this application process, the vetting process, also as mentioned by Rodney and Victor, the Hong Kong Exchange and SFC will come back with comments and any queries, and this is the time where the issuer and the professional parties can go ahead and address them, and we make these amendments to both the English and the Chinese documents. And once that is done, the exchange will invite the sponsors and the issuer for a hearing where they will address any other further questions they have. Now, after that, what we call a post-hearing information pack, this is where the adjustments to the prospectus, answers to the questions have been addressed, and we do another version where we upload that to the exchange. Bulk printing is a term that has been used for a very long time, but now it's also a bit of a misnomer because we're all doing electronic IPOs here. But this is a time where we actually prepare the document with all the offering information that actually goes out to the investors. And then subsequently, that's when the companies actually get the listing out. So as Victor mentioned, Aquila was very efficient in terms of the workflow. I believe we started work, at least from the financial printer's point of view, we started work just at the end of December. We filed the application proof, I believe it was Jan 17th, and listed in March 18th. So that's a very accelerated workflow, and it helps to be at a printer where you have resources, especially with the translation, to be able to handle that sort of efficiency. So just a little bit more detail about what we're talking about. The vetting proof is the prospectus that gets sent to the Hong Kong Exchange and the SFC. The publication proofs, which are redacted but are both in English and Chinese, will be submitted to the exchange to be hosted on their website. So in terms of the working parties curating this document, it's on our platform, so we help the council ring fence all the different comments coming in. And basically, we would typically see an acceleration in the amount of markups and comments that need to be amended on the document, about a week before they do the AP submission. This is also a very critical time, once again, for the translation, because both documents need to be updated at the same time. Okay, so the electronic submissions that we need to do on behalf of the issuer and the professional parties is done through the Hong Kong Exchange e-submission system, or the ESS. And this is something where we collate not only the prospectus, but also the various forms that need to be submitted. And we call this in general a AP pack or A1 pack. So this is done electronically and submitted to the exchange. The vetting process that my other panelists have also touched on, this is when they actually get the comments and questions back, and we work with the professional parties and the issuers to make sure that these are well addressed and updated accordingly on the document. So once that's addressed and we're ready to submit the revised document, what's known as a post-hearing pack, we're pretty much getting to the point where the listing is just around the horizon. So here we're talking about the red herrings that need to go out that have the international play where this goes out to overseas investors. These also, the preliminary offering circulars, there's no pricing information, but it is as close to the final document as will be sent out to the investors. And once everything has been signed off and the pricing information and offering information has been included, that's what's known as the black, and that's the last part of the financial printer workflow where we deem this project completed. So that's just a quick overview, because I know that there are probably a lot of questions that people have. I certainly am very excited to hear more from Victor and Rodney. So hand it back to you, Catherin.
Thank you, Ben. It's actually a very, very thorough sections about the workflow with the financial printer. I think, as we said, this is the interesting time that we can actually understand a little bit more from the questions that are asked by the attendees. And now, first of all, we may actually want to look at some of the higher level questions. A lot of people would say that Hong Kong is a latecomer on SPACs. After US, Europe, or even Singapore, that's actually launched a SPAC a bit earlier than we do. Now, what are the opportunities or the comparative advantage or niche market that Hong Kong or our Hong Kong listing regime can provide as compared to other markets? Victor, what do you think?
Okay. Well, we are so-called a latecomer. Yes, I do agree. And as a corporate finance practitioner in Hong Kong, well, I have to say that seems that just like including Hong Kong Stock Exchange or the Hong Kong SFC, the Hong Kong regulators, right? The first priority seems that is not to say offering this SPAC as an early comer, or want to maybe some of the investor public would interpret it as fighting the market share with the US, to be honest. Okay. From what I understand is they are offering this as an alternative listing channel for companies, but at the same time, they have to ensure that there's full protection to the investors, the public, in Hong Kong, and that's the intention. Okay, so in terms of the attractiveness, I would say, well, still, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, maybe we have an understanding that when you talk about, for example, the professional investors, the international financial institutions, I mean, these are sophisticated players, right? They should have access to not only to the Hong Kong market, but also to the US market, to international markets, right? But however, I think, well, not really as such, I would say. Okay, just like maybe a little bit more sharing of the investors who had invested in Aquila. Okay, we do have got in touch with a lot of these professional investors who have a Chinese background, or even say state-owned investors, institutions based in the mainland. Okay, they are interested in SPAC. They like this idea, but at the same and they are well funded, but they might not be players who are used to be active in the US market. And okay, but you can see, okay, that is this kind of demand, okay, from this type of investors. And then the Hong Kong SPAC market does offer this opportunity for this kind of investors. Yeah, so there's a room there. And also these promoters, Hong Kong-based, China-based promoters, they are more familiar to this market, this region, and also to potential SPAC targets who have their businesses based in this region. So I think that's the edge. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Victor. It's very clear. I think that, you know, Hong Kong as the traditional center that's serving a lot of capital raising need in supporting mainland company and also the private enterprises. Definitely SPACs, as you mentioned, is one of the alternative tools that they can actually easy access to. So Rodney, what do you think about, you know, is it a good fit for the Chinese market for SPAC? And what are the industries that we are thinking that will benefit the most when we talk about SPACs?
Yes, I definitely think that Chinese company would be a good fit for Hong Kong SPAC, because Hong Kong is an international financial hub, and we have been doing a lot of IPOs which related to Chinese companies. Before SPAC, we have been bringing Chinese companies to get listed in Hong Kong, and this has been the case for the last 10, 20 years, starting from the SLE banking sector. So we have the experience, we have the background to understand the Chinese market, the clients involved, and we, of course, we do have the advantage to speak in Mandarin with them as well. So it's easier to, you know, cater to the needs when we are doing and listing an IPO in Hong Kong. I mean, when you're trying to bring clients to listing, you definitely have to consider the jurisdiction that you are bringing them into. So Hong Kong definitely is something that is that the Chinese company is familiar with, and obviously more familiar with that in the US. And of course, on one hand we have you know, Sino and the pressure, and the friction between US and China. So it also kind of encourage the clients, especially our China counterpart, to come to Hong Kong to get listed. And just to echo what Victor has said, SPAC is definitely an alternative channel that we can do a listing. It provides flexibility because we always can, you know, pursue or utilize a dual track approach into things. So they can, at one hand, preparing for a traditional IPO. On the other hand, you can also, you know, pursue a listing via SPAC as well. So that's definitely something that we can utilize properly. And also, I mean, Hong Kong, in terms of latecomer, I would put it this way. I mean, we have been doing corporate finance for a long time, me 15 years, Victor even longer. So we kind of you know, structured deals, not as a SPAC, but in terms of like M&As, or you know, a combination of listing plus M&As and acquisitions. So I mean, the SPAC regime allows us to, you know, formulate the system into the Hong Kong regulatory regime as well. So I see it as you know, a good thing, because we can, you know, have something to look into, the SPAC's framework to look to, and then put a bit of, you know, the Hong Kong color into the SPAC regime and generate something that is really suited to the Hong Kong investment public and the China investees. So yeah, and then we witnessed a lot of development in the Dawanchu. Yeah, Greater Bay Area. We got a lot of SMEs who are capable to to grow and to really have the ability to go into the into public companies. So I think it's Hong Kong is really suited to serve this purpose and get more people to the funds they need.
I just want to jump in really quickly about the latecomer issue. I think US SPACs have been in the front of mind for so many people over the past 2 years, but I think a lot of people fail to remember that SPACs have been around for 30 years in the States, and it's gone through multiple evolutions, if you will, so that the SEC has been making changes to make sure that investors' interests are protected. So throughout these years, the SPAC that we see today is a very different animal. Now, for Hong Kong to have waited till this time, I think it's actually an advantage. The benefits of seeing what worked, what did not work, and the way that they put out the guidelines and the regulations is definitely more for the protection of the investors. So I think it's actually a great thing.
Yeah, indeed. I think that all of you actually summed up very well. That Hong Kong is a good place to actually allow the SPAC to actually shine and grow. What about the challenges or issues? Do we have any areas that you think that Hong Kong should catch up, or any area that you would recommend to change from the regulatory activity perspective to make it more conducive to develop SPACs in Hong Kong? Victor and Rodney, do you have any sort of actually wish list that you want to talk to the regulator or the market players that how we can actually make it work better for us?
Well, maybe I give a couple of points first. Well, the answer is not at the moment, to be honest. Okay, why I'm saying so is because as you know, the policy, this SPAC policy has just been issued back in December. Okay, which is just really a few months ago, and to be honest, at this very moment, okay, to the market players and also even to the Hong Kong regulators, it is still a early implementation of the policy, right? It is still I won't say learning process, but a fine-tuning process. Okay. Maybe I would say I would put it this way. My little advice is, okay, if any potential promoters or potential the SPAC targets or anyone who is interested in launching a SPAC in Hong Kong, I mean, I would say, okay, better do it now or take action now. Yeah, I mean, while they are still okay having setting up a framework okay on this SPAC vetting process or application process. Why I'm saying so is that okay, rather than okay, maybe thinking of okay, let's hope that maybe from the regulator's point of view to make some sort of improvements or speed up the process. Okay, which might be able to, which might be easier to do so. Okay, in a later time. Well, I mean, I would rather advise my clients. Well, okay, rather than waiting for them to further fine-tune the process, let's take the action now. Let's do it now. Let's take the opportunity when we as market players can actually work together with the regulators to on this growing process, which I think, to my experience, is easier to launch a deal okay, rather than yeah, maybe who knows, maybe a year later, okay, there would be a new process, okay, new proposals by the regulators, but at the same time, that could also mean more requirements from the regulators, which actually might not mean that you can finish a SPAC vetting process within 2 months. Yeah.
Any further comments from you, like any wish list or areas that you think that the regulator actually would step in, improve, or actually tighten?
I think at the moment it's satisfactory because we are still in the inception stage of SPACs. At the moment, we have like 12 SPAC listing applications, which is pretty reasonable. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, it's we see quite in the first quarter 12 applications is already a very good development. And also I think yeah, at the moment well, as Victor said, we do Stock Exchange has also published some guidelines as to the requirement of SPAC promoters. So that really, they really spell out the criteria of factors when they look into, when they evaluate the prerequisites of the experience of the promoters. So I think it's a good start. Well, of course, when we're going down to the track, we will see more problems. We may encounter more issues, especially when we are talking about like PIPE investment, because I understand my understanding is that in US PIPE is not a compulsory requirement, but then in Hong Kong we still have to find the market of PIPE investors in order to implement the SPAC transaction. So this is something that we have to look into later down the curve. But I think the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is quite swift in terms of publishing guidance letters as well as listing decisions. So yeah, I mean, I can wait a bit and see how it develops. Of course, last but not least, I think it's in Hong Kong, we still need to know more about Hong Kong SPACs. We are kind of under the market, the whole thing in Hong Kong. A lot of counterparts would think that Hong Kong SPAC has the most stringent requirements. It has the highest fundraising size, but then when your target is like new economy companies, I mean, valuation becomes a less issue because a lot have been catered by consensus between the promoters and PIPE investors. And also a lot of unicorns is developing and growing at the moment, especially in the Greater Bay areas and in the PRC as a whole. So yeah, I mean, it's a very good development for Hong Kong, and we just need to get people more aware of the Hong Kong SPAC regime.
Right. So what about the outlook, right? We have received about 12 applications so far since the launch in January. I think that's amazing. That actually show a lot of keen interest in the market. But what is the outlook that you will see? Would actually grow to 50 or 100 this year? Ben, Rodney, and Victor, what's the predictions?
Well, I think the Hong Kong SPAC market might mirror the US SPAC market in a bit, meaning that the real barometer of a SPAC's success is going to come from the D-SPAC and how the new co performs. So at the present time, Victor's the only one out the gate with a listed SPAC. So we still have to see what happens in the D-SPAC process. But I can confidently say that even before January, I think a lot of people were chomping at the bit to do a Hong Kong SPAC, especially for those that have experience with US SPACs.
Yeah, Rodney and Victor.
Yeah,
yes, yeah, I think the launch at that time, it also depends on how the market actually works as well. There's a lot of tension between US and China, recently in the capital market. Would that affect how the SPAC's interest in the coming month or in the second half of the year?
First of all, I agree with Benjamin that seems that there is a good trend on this SPAC activities. Okay, in terms of 2 points, right? In terms of this, maybe just China-US relationship. We are always talking about maybe there are more Chinese companies maybe thinking of listing in Hong Kong market, and yeah, I mean that certainly offers more opportunities of these Chinese companies listing in Hong Kong, and SPAC, yes, being one of the listing channel, right? So that can also take the opportunity, which means that it seems that there could be more these SPAC targets available, right? And also, and why we also aside this China-US relationship, also we believe that that is a good trend in the SPAC applications in Hong Kong is because, well, first of all, it does make sense. It does make sense to who? It does make sense to the promoters. You know, we actually ran. I'm not going to go into the details, but actually we ran a model. We ran a model which is quite complex. I mean, based on quite a number of factors on calculating, I would say the reward, the reward of promoters in this SPAC exercise. And actually, again, a very ballpark figure is actually it could be the return of SPAC promoters is at least 10 times to their investment. Say 10 times or above and reward. I mean, to the investments along a time frame of 36 months. I think that sounds good, right? and then it certainly, I mean, but one of the many factors that they also have to consider is whether they would have plenty of the SPAC targets. And as was just mentioned now, one of the many factors, including the China-US relationship, could actually offer more SPAC targets available in the market. So yeah, I mean that makes sense, right?
Yeah. What about Rodney? Any sort of active forecast on the growth of the SPACs in coming, second half of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we got 11 listing application in the first quarter. So if you just multiply them, I guess we will have 40 listing application by the year. Of course, this is not meant to be a forecast, but I mean, it just reflects the general increasing awareness of using the SPAC as a listing regime. So yeah, I mean, Victor is very. I do agree with Victor on a lot of points, and I think we just need to talk more about the Hong Kong SPAC regime overall. We can utilize a lot of this the structure that SPACs would bring to us. Definitely, I mean, promoters would be, they do have an incentive which is formalized under our SPAC regime, which is also set out in our listing rules. So it kind of, validates the a more flexible way to compensate our promoters in relation to put like unicorns or new economies target into the listing radar. So it's a good thing, especially when we can fit into the grand scheme of things. When we have a lot of companies in China at the same time, we can also go into the US sphere as well when we are doing listing. So yeah, I mean, Hong Kong is quite flexible. We always have been doing this area of work. So yeah, I think the outlook would be great.
Great. I think that popularity ends our Q&A sections now. And I think that we have got a very optimistic actually outlook on SPAC. And indeed, maybe we should actually have another sections on SPACs at the end of the year to review how does it go, right? But the time goes back to Gilbert.
Okay, thank you, Catherin, and thank you, Benjamin, Victor, and Rodney for your sharing. I feel like time really flies, and we have a bit of the overrun of about 20 minutes. So before we end the webinar, I would just like to remind you all that if you have requested for an attendance confirmation of this webinar, please also send us the request when we send you the thank you email. We will send all the participants a thank you email, so please reply back by saying you need a certificate of the attendance confirmation. And also, if you have some other questions which you would like to share with the all the panelists and even moderator, please send us an email. Our email address is hk-inquiries@allianceadvisors.com. I repeat, hk-inquiries@allianceadvisors.com. So thank you so much. Today's webinar is now adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.